What's up, everyone? It's Thomas with Real Broker here in St. Augustine, and today I have a very special show for you. I'm sitting down with Alex Stewart of the Market Distillery Report, and we're going to go everything that you need to know about the market in St. Johns County, in St. Augustine Beach, and downtown St. Augustine. Make sure you bring your pen and paper because class is in session. Alex, how you doing today, man?
Dude, I'm super excited to be here, and it's a great honor, man. I've been keeping up with your stuff on YouTube. What you're doing is fantastic, and I think to be able to sit down with the local expert of St. Augustine, St. Johns County, it's an honor.
That's a pretty nice intro there. I like that a lot. No one's given me that kind of high regard, and I got to say it's a mutual respect here because what you're doing over at the Market Distillery and over at Bank of England is honestly, it's great stuff, and it's information that people need.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So super excited to see all the stuff that you got coming out.
Yep.
So let's start this off. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where do you work? What do you do? How long you lived here in the area?
Yeah, so just a little background. I started my career in Atlanta, and I worked at a company called Georgia Pacific. And when I applied there, I thought it was a train company. It sounded like it. Turns out it's a toilet paper company. Okay. So that was exciting. But I did financial analysis for them, went and worked at Home Depot after that to do a similar type of thing, and then moved to Jacksonville about 8 years ago to join the Bank of England as a mortgage banker. And so I've been doing that for the last 8 years. And as a part of that, we have started to build this sort of market analysis piece to what we were doing. About 6 years ago, Quentin and I started this, hey, let's look at the market, because he was wanting to make sure he didn't outrun the market, right? He didn't want to hire too many people or expand too fast and then have the market fall out from underneath him. Because I don't know about you, but I think since about 2014, we've all been like, is this the peak, right? Is this the peak? And everybody that's in the industry is like, I can't believe prices are getting up here. Is it about to fall? So we just started that, and it's expanded ever since. And really, it's become its own thing, and that's why we started the Market Distillery. We wanted to create an organization that was independent of Bank of England. We wanted something that was going to be unbiased towards the transaction, so that there wasn't a realtor or a bank involved that wants a client to take a certain action, but rather somebody who can just look at the data and say, here's what's happening. And then you can decide whether you want to make a move or not. But it felt like it was a needed resource because we've seen an increased amount of confusion and complexity in this market. Lots of people not taking action because they're just unsure. But you and I both know, being in the industry, how much value is created by owning real estate. And so we look at it and say, look, how can I help my clients the most? And a big piece of that is providing them data and facts about the market and the trends so that they can make informed decisions. So ultimately, when we say, what's our mission? The Market Distillery is here to help you as a real estate professional present facts and information and trends in an easy to understand format. That's why we distill the market from something complex and numerous down to something that's very easy to understand, so that your clients take action with confidence, so that they take action because they understand what's going on, and ultimately so you can grow your business.
Yeah, and I think that's a big piece that's been missing for a lot of years amongst agents. Really, it's, agents and loan officers, one and the same in terms of just being salespeople, right? And I feel like the direction that you're taking, and when I saw the market report, they did a quarterly market report, you and Quentin, and you kind of laid the foundation of like where our market's at, where it's potentially going, and why you think that. It just provides so much more education to agents that we can then give to our buyers and sellers, which helps them make a decision. So how many people, you mentioned over these past couple of years, like, oh, the market's going to crash, the market's going to crash. Well, would they have had that thought if they had the data and information that you guys are providing today?
Yeah, and if you go back, part of the cool thing here is we've been able to go back in our local market and look at the data before 2008. And it's something that I don't think we necessarily had that ability to do back then, but we do now. And there were clear warning signs. And if you were looking at the information, you were looking at the numbers that came out, maybe you wouldn't have got it immediately, but you would have definitely had a year's heads up. And that would have changed a lot of people's lives. That would have changed a lot of people's businesses, and it would have protected, hopefully, a lot of people. Hindsight's always 20/20, and you get caught up in things. But it still is something that I hope going forward we can be some of the people out there that are able to present truth to the market through the numbers. And, we may say something where we've interpreted it a certain way, but you also are independently thinking, saying, okay, well, I know they're saying that, but I'm looking at the numbers too, and I see something different. And then that only makes us all better, right?
Yeah, for sure. And going back to 2008, I was in high school at the time, so I had no room to buy a house or do anything or know what was going on. But as a professional today, it's like, how did these guys have no idea that any of this was going to happen? And I think that's because there was just 100% a lack of information and access to that information and getting that education.
Well, and a lot of people don't want to look at the true picture, and we're all guilty of that, right? So we try to go to great lengths to consume information that's on both sides of the equation, right? We want to hear what are the arguments for why the market's going to crash, as well as what are the arguments for why it's not going to crash, so that at least we're getting a wide range of opinions, and it can inform us as to what to think about. And that's one of the complexities to this market right now is you can argue both sides of that equation pretty well, and it's hard to know what's true because of that. But one thing I do know is most of the information everybody's getting is national. Yep. And that's the big opportunity that we saw and that we're capitalizing on and that we want to serve our communities with is, okay, that's great. We want those national trends. We want to understand as a country what it was happening. But really what we want to do is drill down to your backyard, because your life is largely not affected by people on the other side of the country, right? Unless they move here.
Yeah, exactly.
Then they can impact you.
Exactly.
But if just like you've been doing, talking to the local sheriff, talking to the local property appraiser, if you understand their mission and what they're doing, that's going to have a far greater impact on your life. So that's why we want to drill down from the national picture, and specifically we're focusing on Florida, starting in Northeast Florida, and then we'll expand out and try to help cover the rest of the state soon.
Yeah, and for the rest of the state, that's an awesome opportunity for you guys to get into, because what you're doing here in Northeastern Florida provides so much value. You're now able to go to different brokerages and say hey, if you guys want this information, you got to have me over here, and you're going to have to pay me a little money, right?
Right.
And that's a great thing though, because they need that education more than anyone.
Well, and just like anybody that does a good job, I'm confident in the value that we bring, right? And that's not because I just think that luckily we've got a 6-year track record of doing this. It's something that's not our first rodeo. It's just something that's been evolving. And so I think it's the most valuable thing that anyone can do in their business right now, and in general, is have accurate information about what's going on in the market, so that if you want to plan your business, you say, hey, I want to put a little more to the side so that I got some cushion, because what I'm seeing is making me a little nervous, or we need to ramp up, right? I want to build a team, because what I'm seeing coming is a huge opportunity, and I want to capitalize on that. So hopefully we can help connect the dots there. We can help the clients say, yeah, I'm ready to take action, because sure, prices are high, but I see the supply and the demand that's showing me that prices are going to go higher.
Yeah. And that's personally my belief on what's going to happen here, and maybe it's not going to be the past 2 years of 20%, year over year, 2% every single month,
right?
Which is a good thing, you know. But it's going to still keep going, just based off if you're looking at our inventory and what we have active on the market today, what's closing. It's all kind of looking like it's pretty bullish, you know? And even the conversation I had with Chris Shee, who's the owner of Mastercraft, I asked him, I was like, hey, what's your outlook on the market here? And he's like, listen, we sold 121 homes last year, and we had a 60-day span where we sold one home. And that was because of the changes in interest rates, the Fed, all that kind of stuff, inflation, all factoring into that equation, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, I'm bullish, I'm buying land, I'm building, I'm moving forward.
Yeah, well, and it's truly, it boils down to simple supply and demand, right? If when we go back to 2008, what happened is we had way too much supply and not enough demand. And that was both bodies, right? People, there weren't, we had a very low birth rate 30 years before that, which caused there to not be a lot of first-time buyers. And then we gave loans to everybody, and the builders were building like crazy, and it just turned into this imbalance. And I always tell people, for me, it's like, we do not have strippers buying their 5th house in Florida from Arizona, right? The Big Short stuff. I love that, because that really was happening, right? Yeah. And so we have people just struggling to buy a house to live in. And that's because after the 2008 crash, so many builders went out. So many builders said, we're not doing that again, that we do not have this overbuilt population issue where there's too many houses and not enough people. We got the inverse of that. We have too many people and not enough houses, and we feel that. There's a lot of people relocating here. You see a lot of apartments going up because that's the fastest way to house people. But it's something that I think we're going to see continue, and it's you cannot catch up to that very quickly without some significant building, and we're just not seeing that on the builder front right now.
Yeah, and that's something that we also talked about. Was like at a point sometime last year, I mean, we had maybe 2,000 homes, maybe 2,500 homes active on the market, ready to sell, where normally that number is somewhere between 9 to 12,000 homes on the market. So obviously we didn't have the homes for sale, and he kind of painted this picture, and it's hard when we talk about how many homes are for sale and how many homes are needed, but he was like, think about that. He's like, that's almost like having the size of Nocatee needing to come to the market for us to be in a balanced market.
It doesn't happen quick, especially when costs are high on supplies and labor and all that. I mean, and plus, if you're the builders, you're incentivized to keep it moderated, because what does that do for you, right? Keeps your price points up, keeps you competitive. You're able to plan out a little bit further. But one of the things that we talk about, Jacksonville went from a minor metro to a major metro within the last 5 years. We went from less than 1.5 million to over 1.5 million. And so just population alone, we're adding, 300, 400, 500,000 people to the area. We're not building that many houses, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of what we had that was excess has been absorbed. And now we're left with, 7,000, 6,000 houses on the market. And we have to stop. You have to realize that, 7,000 houses 5 years ago is not the same as 7,000 now because of how many more people are here, right? You need more houses than that.
I think I saw a stat from the 2020 census, or it was some stat prior to the pandemic, and it was saying that every week 8,000 people are moving to Florida. And it's like, okay, so if that was prior to the pandemic, what is that number actually at?
Sure.
Probably in the 10 to 16,000 people a week moving to Florida.
And I'll tell you, the answer lies at the DMV.
Yeah.
If we can get into the DMV, we will know. I know last time I was going to get my driver's license updated, the lady that has the clipboard outside checking everybody in, because, you got to get a 40-person line before they open to try to make this reasonable, is like, well, about half my list today is out-of-state registration on cars getting changed over to Florida, right? And so she knows. She's the one that's getting that live data every day.
Yeah.
So I know that's something that we're trying to focus on, is relocation and understanding that live, because that is a big trend. And it's something that is, you see it in the license plates while you're driving around town. Some of it's
season.
Yeah, some of it's vacation, but I think a lot more of it's people that just live here and they have those New York plates. And that's something that we haven't ever dealt with before. But I will say this, when we go back and look at the data, and, I have a great benefit. My job at Bank of England and the relationship with my partners, Quentin and Daniel here, allows us to have access to some unique data. So we get loan apps for people that are buying from out of state and moving here to buy a primary residence. And one of the insights that we've seen is that this trend started in 2019. And I don't think a lot of people would have thought about that because everybody assumes it's a pandemic-related phenomenon.
Yep.
But what it is instead of being started by the pandemic, it was accelerated by the pandemic. So you had people starting to move here, whether that's political or weather or age. Another big thing is we got a lot of aging baby boomers, right? They don't want to live in the cold. They want to come down to the warmth. But then it just shot off when work from home became a normal thing. And it's kind of like, well, if we're going to do this, let's do this. So that's an interesting trend that we got to keep up with. And of course, it's come down this year as rates have gotten higher. People haven't been making the move, but we still see the same number of applications to relocate here on the loan side as we did about 3 years ago. So it's still an elevated number. They're just not necessarily actually buying a house because of where the financing is right now. But there's hope on the future for that as we're seeing rates come down, and that'll probably continue through the first half of this year at least.
Yeah. And that's a question we're going to get into a little bit later after we get through the foundation of the market. But the one thing you did say about the, you touched on the demographics, of we've heard of demographic selling, the person, I think they made the, one of the first mass-produced cars for everyone to drive in, then also created the minivan. So once they became the age to have kids, then they sold them the same thing that they needed.
Yeah,
right?
Lee Iacocca, I think.
Yeah,
is who did that. Yep,
exactly. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the demographics for our area here. Why we see people moving. The baby boomer generation and the millennials that are in play now.
Yep.
Both of those are the big buyers in our area, correct?
Yeah, it's the two largest groups of the population when you just say total numbers. Baby boomers being those people that were born, we'll just call it around the 50s, and millennials, those being born around the late 80s, early 90s. And when you do the numbers, again, like I referenced 08, the issue is 30 years prior to that, which is the average age of a first-time home buyer, there was a dip in the population of births. So there weren't as many people being born. Now, that also happened to correlate with when abortion became legal. So there just were fewer births. And so what that resulted in is a smaller number of first-time buyers 30 years down the road, which happened to be 2008. Right. So some of this is a demographic trend. Absolutely. Right. If it's like the ocean tide, the ocean tide can come in and come out, and it raises the boats or sinks the boats. Right.
Yeah.
If you have more people, guess what? You're probably going to have more real estate transactions. And if you have fewer people, vice versa. Right. So what we see now is we still see an active baby boomer population, and we see a millennial population that is reaching its heights of the number of millennials turning 30 and ultimately being of age to buy a house. And so they're both in the same markets. They tend to be competing for a lot of the same houses, unfortunately. And we know who's winning that right now is the baby boomers, the people with the money and the credit. Yep. But it's presenting a unique sort of phenomenon of there's a lot of people active right now and a lot of people that want to be active. And one of the things that's really interesting is there's a company out there, Zonda, and they have a baby chasers index, and the name is, we'll say, controversial, right? It at least causes you to raise your eyebrows.
Yeah.
And what it is it's parents or grandparents, so these baby boomers that are relocating back to where their kids are living because they want to be close to their family. They're chasing their babies, right? Yep. And so that's what's happening. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that. And so I think we've got good momentum on this demographic front, at least for the next 3 to 5 years. The challenge becomes when the baby boomers stop to be active, right? Because we know based on their age, they're going to start to maybe sell houses as they need to relocate to maybe assisted living, or they move into their family. Yeah, move in with their kids. So if I'm planning this, I'm thinking, okay, over the next 3 to 5 years, make hay while the sun is shining, because it appears as though population is in our favor. As that baby boomer population starts to age, we may start to see a drag on the market, though, because then now we're going to have more supply coming in because they're going to sell their house and move. They're not potentially going to buy a house, so it's not like they're selling and buying. So that's something that we look forward to as we start to forecast things out and think about what's coming in the future.
Yeah, and that's something that I thought of as well in terms of the workforce here. Our generation, for the most part, college was like, hey, you don't want to go work a blue collar job. You want to go work, go to college, get a good job, all that kind of stuff. And then for a lot of people that go to college, as we know, they just end up kind of saddled with debt and they go into a regular job anyway. Yeah. So I think what's going to happen in the future here, especially with our area, well, at least in St. Augustine, we have a lot of baby boomers moving to St. Augustine to retire, right? And that's going to be an aging population. They're not entering the workforce. Right. And what's one of the bigger problems that we've had over these past couple of years is getting people to work, you know, to actually build the houses and just do all the regular services for that.
Yep.
And our generation's not hopping in there like crazy, so that blue collar work, I think, is going to be a premium over these next couple of years, because that baby boomer generation, they're moving out of that work, which was probably the larger population within that industry.
Yeah. So I'm an education junkie, and I relate very much to what you're talking about. And I'm like, I have a son who just turned 3, and he will, as far as I'm concerned, will go to the trades. I'm like, you're going to learn HVAC, you're going to learn electrical, and you're going to learn plumbing. And I may learn it along with you, right? Like, I think you're head on the issue of qualified labor and having enough. But I will say this, Florida is unique compared to a lot of states. When you look at our unemployment rate, especially in the Jacksonville metro area, we're at 2.5, the state's at 3. and the United States is at 3.5. So we're outperforming in terms of unemployment. So we do have more people going to work, and that's part of why our economy and our local housing market is booming and outperforming. We have to continue to remember that, again, the economy is local. So you get these national headlines talking about recessions. We see this unemployment gap of just more jobs than there are workers to fill them. And that doesn't exist equally across all states. And when you look at the GDP numbers of what's changing, in the month or in the quarters where the United States was shrinking last year, Florida was still growing. And that's something that nobody really talks about. And instead, our clients get this headline of recession's coming, crash landing.
Yeah.
You look on YouTube, shoot, nothing's going up except for Bitcoin. And that's one of those things that we hope to help set the record straight on and provide that information so that people go, you know what, restaurants are packed, people are shopping, people are working, jobs are good. And it doesn't mean that they're the best ever, but relative to other states, it's pretty good. So,
yeah. And that's something, I feel like nationally, and this is just me personally talking, I feel like nationally we've been in a recession since last year, and I'm going to say January of last year, we really hit a recession, or where the trickling in of where we could possibly start a recession really happened then. And now we're seeing nationally that they're starting to talk about a soft landing, a recession, maybe one of those two things happening. I don't know if that's really going to affect our local market here, but that's the point of why we need to go over these local stats.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, again, I explain this like a class average. If you're in school and the class average goes down, and we say that's a recession, right? Because that's all the recession is the economy shrank for the country as a whole when you put it all together. If the class average goes down, that doesn't mean every student, got worse grades. That means on average every did, but there could be some students that started to get better grades too. It just didn't do enough to actually help it. And I think it's a good analogy because Florida is one of those students that's actually testing better, even though the class average is coming down. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Have you seen that one article from, I think, Housing Wire and I'm sure you've seen it from every realtor on social media, about inventory actually hitting under 1 million homes here over December.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's tough because we're training ourselves to, again, look at a national number, right? 1 million homes. Okay, well, are 500,000 of those in California? Do we know where they all are? That's always tough, but it's a national issue, right? We do have a shortage of housing, and some of that is it's gonna fix itself because people are gonna leave areas, and then there's gonna be too much housing in that area as relocating within the country is becoming more and more common. I just know that when we look at inventory, everywhere seems to have a shortage because the builders never caught up and they stopped building for a while after the crash. And it's something that I think we're going to face for a long time because I don't see the builders catching up because they're still building at the pace of, I think, like 1992 when you look at it on a chart. So it's not a quick pace. And the costs of everything don't help because they're not incentivized to throw it up as fast as possible and make as many as possible. They're keeping it very moderated.
Yeah, and you could even say like the change in builder confidence. Builder confidence hit a low in December, and now it's actually starting to pick back up,
right,
which is a good thing, right? But obviously, the last 6 months we've had federal funds rate was raised fastest in the entire history of the federal funds rate, and then interest rates followed that as well.
Yeah.
Right. So how did that affect our local market here?
Yeah, great question. So a common misnomer is when the Fed raises rates that essentially mortgage rates go up. Now they can be correlated, meaning they do go up at the same time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're caused by the Fed raising rates. And so when you look at it, what has caused mortgage rates to go up is inflation. And what caused inflation was putting a bunch of money into the economy in 2020. We have a significant amount more money in the economy than we did before, and they're not doing much to take it out, right? So every time a bank makes a loan for a house, that's new money. Every time somebody is, charging on their credit card and carrying a balance, that's new money. And we made a lot of loans over the last 2 years, in addition to all the PPP money that went out there that was forgiven. And every time Congress passes anything, it's billions of more dollars, right?
Yeah. Every day it seems like, another billion out the door.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is a little bit, Peter Schiff talks about it of like lacing the punch bowl, right? Of putting some alcohol in the punch bowl. Mm-hmm. What the Fed has done to the economy is they've essentially gotten us all drunk by putting a bunch of booze in the punch bowl, and all of us are hammered. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we start to have that hangover effect, what do we want? We want more alcohol, right? We want to not feel that pain. And so we've been trained by the Fed to know that they're going to come to rescue us and give us what we need, which is more stimulus, right? So we're in an interesting phase because there's a diminishing return to that. It takes more and more money to actually get some return for the Fed to stimulate the economy, right? Like you need, if you've been drinking a lot, you need to drink harder stuff and more of it.
Hair of the dog, right?
Right. So I think we just are entering a phase where it's kind of like, it feels like a fork in the road. And I've learned that the can be kicked down the road a lot longer than we think. Mm-hmm. I've gone through plenty of phases of being like, it's going to crash any day, mm-hmm. right? And then it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And then you just keep going. But we're talking about, can we bring down inflation at a normal rate without breaking too many things? Or are we going to essentially overdo it and cause things to start to collapse? And we saw this a little bit with crypto, where that industry had this massive sort of implosion because the price of Bitcoin went down, and suddenly all these loans that were made are no good. And so people are losing money and fraud and all sorts of stuff. That's probably the tip of the iceberg, not the whole thing, right? Yeah. And so the question is always just going to be, when is it going to happen? How big is it going to be? And how quickly are they going to re-stimulate? And that's part of why naturally we're seeing rates come down, but we may not ever see rates come down any further than 5s, maybe 4s, right? So the people sitting on the sidelines waiting for the 3s and the 2s, mm-hmm. don't hold your breath, because you may never breathe again.
Yeah.
The stimulus that will potentially be required to sort of resuscitate things if things do crash is probably going to be significant, and that's going to jumpstart inflation again. So this may be something where it's pick your poison. Do you want to have joblessness, and do you want to have people that are, not able to pay their bills and not able to eat and things like that? Or do you want to have a thing where prices are just rising? And politically, we want to have prices that just rise, because then people are at least able to do all the normal things.
Less hurt for everyone across the entire market. It's like, okay, well, you can still rent and be happy and have a job and pay your bills, eat your food, all that kind of stuff. Right. But maybe you can't afford a house, but at least you can survive, opposed to like we go into a 2008 scenario. It's a lot of pain in the market there.
Yeah, and we should clarify, this is not going to be caused by housing. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing, right? So if you look at home values over the life, home values have pretty much only ever gone down one recession, and it was 08. Mm-hmm. And it was because it was caused by housing. Mm-hmm. Every other recession has been caused by something else. And typically housing does really well during recessions, mm-hmm. compared to what you would think, because rates come down during recessions. It's counterintuitive. If bad news for the economy is good news for interest rates on mortgages. It means you're going to get cheaper rates. So it's going to stimulate things. But we should also say this, right? No matter what happens, just like this local versus national approach, you're in control of your own destiny. And you can have the mindset of, every day I can go out there and I can make the world a better place. And the cool thing, we talk about this joblessness, or the people that are not willing to get out there that are our age. Well, that's because they're innovating, potentially. I mean, the creator economy, look at what we're doing right now, right?
Very true.
This is something that is not captured in the normal ways that the government measures the employment, but it doesn't mean it's not significant, mm-hmm. and it doesn't mean it's not the future. And I think the beauty of America, the beauty of the people that are here, is we're innovators, we're creatives, we have the ability to come up with unique and valuable thoughts, and we can really create our own future. And so, as much as we talk about potential doom and gloom and all this crashing, put your blinders on, keep going forward, and you can create your own destiny that's as good as you want to create it.
It's like, what's your plan? Figure out your plan, stick to it, and execute it, right? Yeah. And it's like, okay, so the people that bought a house in 2008 and they held onto their house, where are they at now?
They're doing great still.
They're not doing too bad. You know, was it some struggle years? Yes.
Right.
But today, you know, if they didn't sell their house prior to 2019, right?
Yeah.
They're up pretty good on that house.
Well, and that's the difference in our market today too, is everybody has equity. Now, again, if prices came down 10%, guess how much equity they have? Still a ton.
Yeah.
Right? We're not borrowing 100% or more every time anyone buys a house on average. People that bought a year ago in Jacksonville made 10% on their house on average.
Yep.
That's nuts. In a year where rates went from 3 to 7, nobody would have expected that. And I guarantee that's not the same everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and I think with that is, you know, you talked about crypto a little bit.
Yep.
I think everyone looks for the get rich quick scheme, and with social media, with those creatives now, everyone's like, oh yeah, buy real estate and it'll go up X amount of dollars. Like, it's a buy and hold game, guys. You know, it's a long game for real estate. The last 2 years were anomaly years.
Yeah.
So it's not the same thing as a cryptocurrency, which, I mean, is there potential in that? Definitely.
Sure.
You know, look at, you mentioned the fraud, right? With FTX or STX. It's like, think about that. There was massive fraud and something that people are already uncertain of, and it still holds its value around, Bitcoin around like $20,000.
Sure.
Know? So that's pretty interesting for now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll asterisk on that, right? So let's start talking about the local market stats here. We'll talk about Jacksonville, and we'll talk about, you know, obviously my market, St. Augustine.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the big meat and potatoes of the Jacksonville market. What are the foundations of the market that you see?
Yeah. So, you know, in general, whenever I am analyzing a market, it's always going to be supply and demand. That's what we're always going to look at. And so when you think about the metrics that go for each of those, on supply, you got the number of houses on the market, which we call that active inventory. You have months of supply. And what that term is that saying, okay, we have this many houses on the market and we're selling this many houses. So how long would it take us to run out of houses if we didn't add any more to the equation? So typically you want to see that in a range between 2 to 5 months of supply. And what that means is there's enough houses for transactions to happen. There's enough houses for deals to get done and people to have options, but there's not so many houses that you're really having to push price down to sell something. And there's not too few houses that you literally can't find anything to buy, right? I would say this, our market has a greater risk of seizing up because people don't take action than it does of falling off a cliff. And that's because everybody has 2.5-3% interest rates that owns a house. They're not going to sell that. Yeah. They're not going to go and buy. And so you're going to reach a stalemate if you get to a point where rates go back up or rates don't come down enough. So that's on the supply side. Price is also in there on supply because you got to understand what is it priced at. And then on the demand side, we look at things like days on market, you know, closed sales, pending sales, and then I also like to look at price reductions. And price reductions tell us sort of, you know, how deep do we have to discount this house to get it sold, and we'll call that price behavior. So we look at those things, and you really have to put it all together to see the picture. You know, I always think about it like a puzzle, right? We're getting each individual piece, and you can't actually tell what's going on until you put them all together, and then now you have this picture. So if you look at Jacksonville, and you know, what's cool is we dive into some St. Augustine stats that are a little bit different, but Jacksonville, as well as the United States, we saw this increase in supply, right? And the stats are staggering, you know, 150% increase in supply. Well, you're going from 3,000 to 7,000 houses. Yeah. Right. And that's where it's important that you look at both the number and the percentage, right? You can't just look at one of those because you may be misled, right? My favorite was the foreclosures are up in Jacksonville, you know, 100%. It's like, well, we went from 2 to 4.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not a wave of foreclosures. It's just, we literally didn't have any. So anything off of that's a huge percentage. But in Jacksonville in general, we've sort of come back to this normal level of inventory. And if you look back prior to 2020 and 2021, that's what we averaged. We averaged about 7,000 or 8,000 houses on the market at a time. And, we almost have to put an asterisk on those 2 years, like, a baseball record of, we used steroids these 2 years because rates were way lower because we forced them down. And that's not a normal market. Yeah. It's not a normal market. So we see inventory getting back to that, and that's helpful. I mean, this acting in this market, buyers have options.
Yep.
And it doesn't always mean they're perfect options, but they at least are not saying, here's my child, can I please place an offer on your house, right? Like they were in 2020 and 2021. We'll take everything I have. I just want a chance to buy this house.
Yeah.
So that's good. Months of inventory is about 3.5 right now. So you're right there in a good range. And on the pricing, prices have gone up. I mean, I don't think anybody would have thought prices were up about 10% in Jacksonville over this year, given that rates did what they did. There were a lot of people that are saying, I'm waiting for prices to fall 20 or 30%.
Yep.
And, the beauty of being Nostradamus and trying to predict the sky to fall is when it does, you look really smart.
Yeah.
And talking about those things gets more eyeballs than talking about, hey guys, it's probably gonna be nice. We're gonna have 2% appreciation this year. Like that doesn't really get attention.
Yeah.
So there's some of that out there, but on the demand side, it's a different market from the standpoint of realtors, and this, are adapting to this market. It's all about expectations. We had buyers and sellers that expected one thing in January and had to really figure out how to get to what reality was as the market was moving faster than their minds were willing to accept it. And that's tough.
Yeah.
But in December, I feel like we started to get to where everybody sort of knew what to expect, which is more of a normal pace of the market, normal scale of the market. And so we're seeing that homes are taking about 30 days to sell. Homes are taking about 30 days to sell. Now, the average for the whole market's about 60 days. So you're seeing this discrepancy between good houses and houses that sell, right? We talked about that pre-show.
Yeah.
The closings, though, finished on a strong note. We are not seeing a ton of inventory come to the market. So like we said, that's restricted.
Yeah.
So it's keeping everything in some pretty good ranges. And the craziest part is you look in January, we're already down to 6,200 homes.
Yeah.
And it's like 800 homes went under contract in January because everybody said for New Year's, I'd like to make a resolution to buy a house.
Let's go. Yeah.
Right. And there weren't any more houses that came to the market. So it's just interesting how quickly things can change.
I think with one thing that should be noted with that is that real estate is cyclical.
Yeah.
You can look at the roller coaster of up and downs of what happens with transactions, right? And typically during this time of the year, you don't see many people wanting to put their homes on the market. And a lot of people wait for that spring, summer selling season, right? So that's kind of what happened here. But I also feel like that's coupled with, we talked about this a little bit, the interest rates, right? How many people have an interest rate under 4%? Well, I think a lot of people think like, oh, well, if you bought a house within the last 3 years, you've got a great interest rate. Well, that's true, but what's a major part of your guys' business? Refinancing, right? So how many people also refinanced at that time, didn't make a move at all, but refinanced, maybe took care of a couple things, maybe paid off some debt, and now they're just sitting pretty with a 3.5%, 4% interest rate, and they don't have to do anything. They got the equity in their house. They got a great interest rate, they got a great payment. Why would they go anywhere when they look at a 7% interest rate in the market and what they get for that?
Yeah, you bring up a couple great points. You're exactly right. We should highlight that people got their finances in line in 2020 and 2021 pretty well. There was plenty of people that were able to sell a house, pay off all their debts, and get into a new house at a very low interest rate, and now their stuff is fixed low. Or you refinanced. You cleared out all your debt. And so a lot of the people, credit scores have actually gone up, even though rates have gone up. Debt to income, that's something that when we look at all the loans that have been done, which is a large amount, the debt to income has not gone up like you would have thought. I think everybody, if you just said, hey, is debt to income higher now than it was prior to rates being at 7%, you'd be like, of course. Yeah. Right? I mean, we hear about the credit card debt. We hear about rates being high. But at the end of the day, what's higher is their housing payment. But what we find is they have far less any other debt. And that's just because I think so many people were able to clean it all out with refinance or selling. And it put people in a much better position than we probably give anything credit for. So that's a huge deal. And, speaking to the refinances, it's a lot of business that went away. And, I do think we are seeing credit card numbers creep back up, right? You look at consumer spending and it's reaching record high levels. People are going to reach back into their house to get that fixed again. The equity is still there. And yeah, they may have a higher payment, but it's a lot less than the bill they have on that credit card. And it feels a lot better than the weight on their shoulders of that credit card.
So let's talk a little bit about the market in St. Augustine. We got some graphs here that we want to pull up here.
Yeah.
So we've got it broken down by St. Augustine Beach and the St. Augustine City, all the way going back to 2017. So we got some good stats here for you. So over here at the top, we got $901,000 for the average sale price on the beach, and then it finished at $771 for the end of the year. So people would see that and they say, "Oh, our market went down," but in reality, it still went up.
Yeah, it's odd. So in January, the average price was $731, and then the market finished at $771 in the beach. And I think this is a good example because the chart does not look like this in Jacksonville because there's far more houses. So you get a much smoother line. In smaller markets where there's a fewer number of transactions, it can be a lot harder to actually do this kind of exercise and look at the numbers and actually come away with trends. When I look at this, you see that it's an upward trend, but from one month to the other, we went from 901 all the way down to 565 from March to June. If you're sort of paying attention on a micro level, you're like, the market's crashing. That it almost halved, right? But if you know that there's so few transactions at the beach, you're going to see this kind of wild movement. And that can be why people look at median versus average. I think that's a good point to talk about that. I typically look at average to start, and what that is all the closings divided, total price divided by the number of closings when you add it all up. Median is spread it all out in a line and you just pick the middle. It's a lot harder to move median, so maybe that's a little smoother, but you need to look at both because I think if you only look at one, you cannot get the whole picture.
I totally agree with that. I think the one thing that's really interesting about our market is you look here and it's like in May it was $901,000 and you talked about the average and the median. Well, it's tough when you're talking about St. Augustine Beach alone because you have homes, you have condos, you have townhomes. Obviously, the single family, the townhomes, the condos, they're all different price points, you know. And when you have a home on the intercoastal, a home on the ocean, they're going to raise that price point pretty significantly. And you're talking about such a small area of St. Augustine Beach where the population is probably 15,000 people, I think. So there's not that many homes going up and selling and all. So the data exactly is going to show you more or less a rocky road.
And I think as a realtor or as someone who's trying to buy a house or sell a house, this is helpful for understanding, again, the tides of the ocean, right? Of understanding these big trends. At the end of the day, though, if you're going to buy or sell a single property, that's where the value of a realtor comes in because they can actually dive down and say, are you looking at just condos? Well, we need to just focus on what the condo market's doing because that's what matters to you. And we don't care about condos over here if you're trying to buy here. We want to focus on what you're trying to buy. And so our job, when we do this is I want to identify the big trends for y'all and help you understand how our market may be different than other markets, so that you can talk about that in general. And then when you have these specific clients, that's when you do your CMAs, your market analysis for that specific kind of a property. But, crazy stat, like we were talking about pre-show at the beach, sure, prices weren't up dramatically in 2020, but if you go all the way back to 17, so just 5 years, right? And when we talk about the average time that somebody owns a house, it's 7 to 9 years. So if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to buy my first house, okay, if you plan on being in it for 5 years, look, you were back at 388 and now you're up at 771. I mean, you're talking about 99% increase in price over 5 years. That's a pretty good return on investment, which speaks to how great this area of St. Augustine is and how much it's growing, right? And you see similar things with the city, right? We were at 198. Now we're at 435. That's pretty good. That's over 100%.
That's amazing. Yeah. And And that's what it goes back to. Real estate's a long-term game. You're not going to, it's not the 2021, 2022 where you can be up on your house in 6 months. It doesn't work like that historically, right? We just happen to see these anomaly years these past 2 years, and we're just dealing with the effects of it today.
Yep. And St. Augustine's unique too, because you see these two horns. You went up to 901 March. Well, okay, rates were still probably about 4% there. And then all of a sudden the market totally changed. Same thing here in May. So it lasted a little bit longer in the city, went up to 619, and then it dropped way off. I would read this as people with urgency bought properties and spent a decent amount of money buying properties before rates went up, seeing what was on the wall. So that to me says you've either got some smart money buying second homes or investments, right? Or you got some very smart residents that said, let's go ahead and make a move before things get crazy. Jacksonville, you did not see that type of, sort of peak right there in the middle. It was not that pronounced. But that's interesting, and that's why it's very cool to look at, again, your local market rather than take this whole national statistic or even just the state level.
Yeah, and looking at the inventory here, great. Yeah, pull this up. So the inventory going back to 2017, we're still not really there, I mean, maybe the city, but the beach is not, they're slacking pretty hard. You can see what, 40, is that it?
Yeah, 41 houses on the market as of December at the beach.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing when you think of it. And you compare it over to what it's over at 100 in 2017.
Sure. Well, it's like the beach got sold out. I mean, and this is really cool insight because you don't see this in Jacksonville. So if you're looking at Jacksonville stats, you may know the beach well enough and you're paying attention to it that you see this, but seeing it in a picture like this really illustrates just how constrained the supply is. And what is that going to do to prices?
Yep, it's going to make them go up.
It's going to make them go up, right? Yep. It's more expensive to buy at the beach now because there's fewer things for sale. And we don't see that in the city, though, which is interesting. So this looks a lot more like the Jacksonville chart, where it's there's this big bite taken out of it, where you had this buildup of inventory, 400, 300 houses. Then it goes down and kind of comes back seasonally because we know at the end of the year, more houses are on the market because fewer people are making a move. Then in summer comes, and then as the rates went up, it built back up. But 351. I mean, you're back to sort of the levels you were at before any of the craziness happened. So it's not dramatically higher to the point where you'd be like, oh my gosh, the market's totally different. It just feels like that because you're coming from this hangover of, nothing on the market.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say with the city inventory there, I would venture to say that because they have downtown St. Augustine, the historical area, which is when you're thinking of the city of St. Augustine, that's really what you're considering. But that actually the city of St. Augustine it goes over into Anastasia Island a little bit, and it goes over into West Augustine. So on the other side of US 1, where you have other housing inventory at different price points, So I think that's something to really, when you're seeing the 351 and the increase there.
You think that's new construction?
I think it's possible. New construction, yeah, because all in West Augustine now, I'm working on potential deal tonight where we're putting a new construction home on because the land over there is just much cheaper than what it is on St. Augustine Beach, what it is on downtown St. Augustine. So you can build a new construction home for $400,000 just 5 minutes outside downtown St. Augustine, So the one thing also in that section of town is that the zoning is a lot of times it's commercial zoning or it's RS3 zoning, or it's some type of zoning that allows you to be an investor, to be an Airbnb, or if you wanted to build something and have your own bed and breakfast or a commercial shop or something like that, you could do that in a lot of the areas in West Augustine, which is still part of that downtown St. Augustine area. So, cool. and with the past 2 years, that market has seen a ton of investors flood into it, and we've helped a couple investors go in there, and they're cash flowing better than they thought they would.
Sure,
and for me, I think that area, being along with downtown St. Augustine, with the zonings available there, that's where it's become very investor heavy. And we talked about this pre-show, Flagler College. Before, if you're looking at probably 2017 numbers, probably investors were eating up that properties there just so they could rent it out to college kids, and make a good bit of money because they're going to rent them out by the room, right?
Right.
So they're going to make some good money. But now college kids have a hard time affording downtown St. Augustine because it's become more of a tourist attraction, second home type of situation.
Yeah, Airbnb. Yeah.
Airbnbs. Yeah. And people doing a mix of it, right? They use it when they're in town and they Airbnb it so they make some money so they don't have to worry about it. So actually Flagler College bought a hotel right around the corner on US 1 for $20 million just so they could have a place to put their kids. They were actually already renting rooms in that hotel before they bought it. So they had like 50 rooms in there that they were renting just for the kids there. So
that's crazy.
It's wild. So I imagine like there's almost like a new group of people moving into town,
Sure.
So like the investors are getting pushed out, but there's investors going in there, but there's also people that like, they want to live downtown St. Augustine. They want access to the bars, the restaurants, the history down there, and
right.
the walkability of the area.
Well, and you see that in Jacksonville to a degree as well, and that's largely that relocation trend, right? Mm-hmm. You got people coming from more expensive areas that are more comfortable paying higher prices, that will bid it all up, and that's, that can sound bad, right? Like it's these people are coming from out of area and they're pushing us out of our homes, and it's not necessarily that. It's just more of, if you're buying your first house, you may want to live at the beach. You may want to live in downtown St. Augustine, but you're probably going to have to consider other areas because of the affordability factor there. Yes. And the good news is, guess what? Again, life is what you make it. Mm-hmm. When you buy there, I've got plenty of coworkers, friends, clients that are buying in some of these fringe areas, the Green Cove Springs, mm-hmm. The north side, the west side in Jacksonville. And they buy, and guess what? They enjoy it. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have ever thought about it because they had this idea of, I want to live at the beach and I want to have this certain kind of life and I want it to look this way. But when they actually go out there and do it, they find, okay, Green Cove's pretty nice, right? Yeah. Like I got a really nice house and I feel comfortable with my bills. Life is good. I can grow my family. And guess what? As that happens, cool stuff's going to happen around those developments, right? The more people that go in, the more shops, the more restaurants and all that stuff that's going to end up coming out around there. So it's just I've heard Quentin and other friends talk about, Nashville, for example. Like Jacksonville feels like Nashville just 10 years ago. And so we're on that analogy. We're on that path, and change is tough. Change is painful for a lot of people. If you've been in Jacksonville for 5 years, 10 years, you're looking around going, why is everything so expensive? Mm-hmm. Jacksonville's a new place, man. We're a major metro, and I think St. Augustine, you're seeing that same thing happen here. It's a destination. It's got such rich history. It's got such great. I go down there for the food. Mm-hmm. I mean, you get restaurants down there that food scene that you don't get necessarily in Jacksonville as easily. Yeah. And it's just, it's a wonderful place to be.
And even 10 years ago, I mean, and that's something I talk a lot about on my YouTube channel. It's like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the food scene was like, hey, you want some seafood? We got it. That's it. But that was pretty much the food scene in St. Augustine. And now we're seeing such a variety. And that's probably because all the change of what's happened these past couple of years. But we got so many great restaurants down there, distilleries, wineries, like all that kind of stuff right in downtown St. Augustine. So if you're living, if you're looking for that lifestyle, like I want to live close as I can to the beach, but I still want to be able to walk around, walk my dog and go down to the waterfront. And
yep.
Like that's all readily available in downtown St. Augustine.
So I got to ask though, before we move on from this, and this is not related to what we're talking about.
Okay.
Favorite restaurant, St. Augustine.
Ooh,
where am I going?
That's really tough. So have you been to Llama yet?
No.
Okay. So Llama is it's a Peruvian restaurant, and it's literally maybe 3 times the size of this room.
Okay.
And you have to always get a reservation through Open Table.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're not going to be able to sit down. Like, unless they have a cancellation, you won't be able to get in there. But it's a Peruvian style food. The chef, his name's Marcel. He's the owner of it. He might be like in his mid 30s, and he owns this great restaurant in town. And it's right on A1A, and it's in Davis Shores. But I definitely recommend doing that one. Yeah, either that, but I'm sure you've been to Caps too. Caps is a great one.
Caps is like a fringe St. Augustine. I feel like it's off the beaten path. It's a little out of town. Yeah. But it's wonderful. I know for us, Osprey Tacos is one of the things that I wanted to shout out. 2020 hit, and with 2 little kids, we would drive down to St. Augustine. It burns about 45 minutes down there. Mm-hmm. Go eat at Osprey Tacos, get to sit outside. I would put their tacos up against anybody and then drive back. And it was a great way to spend a day. So,
well, the next time in your town, we'll have to go grab Burrito Works Taco Shop.
Okay.
They got this thing. It's called a Mexican UFO. It's like Crunchwrap Supreme almost, and it comes out looking like a UFO, and it's It's great, and we can do a little taco test.
I was just going to say, we need to do the Taste of St. Augustine video edition.
We'll do the short form content for it. That'd be great. Yeah.
Sweet.
Well, the one thing I was going to say too, you're talking about these fringe areas, right? I just had my sister, she's looking to buy she's under contract right now in Palatka, right?
Yep.
And you talked about Green Cove Springs, Middleburg, that area out there. It's in the path of growth, you know, because what are they building between I-10 and I-95? First Coast Expressway, right? Yep. So people are going to eventually skip past Jacksonville because you don't need to go there if you don't want to get stuck in the traffic and everything.
Yep.
So you're going to have pretty much, instead of a flyover town, you're going to have a drive over town, right? So you're going to have all these towns that are going to be benefiting from this large highway being put through there that connects 95 and I-10.
Yeah, and when you look at the numbers, you see that. When we look at growth areas, the major metros are lagging in growth compared to some of the smaller towns in Florida. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an affordability thing, right? We're seeing that population move out from the cities and say, okay, well, let's go buy over here in this area. It's more affordable. Maybe they see the growth, and that's something that we're keeping an eye on. I think that's going to be a trend going forward in Florida. Like, sure, the metros are going to grow, but you're going to probably see more growth in these smaller, maybe tier 2 cities, just like St. Augustine.
I'd venture to say on average, probably the cities would grow with a younger population. Mm-hmm. And then why we're seeing the increase outside of the cities is because you have people moving from, like, the major people moving here are from DC,
right,
New York,
California,
Texas,
yep,
in Texas, where these big metros are, right, comparatively to Jacksonville at least. And if they're going to relocate here, they're retiring, they're hanging up their work boots, they're not doing it anymore. Do they want to be in the hustle and bustle of the city? Or do they want that Florida life, right? Sure. So what people have in their idea of, like, what their golden years are going to look like, does that consist of living in the city of Jacksonville? Probably not, but right, being outside of there, lower price point, so it's more affordable for their fixed income. Mm-hmm. And then also just the lifestyle is maybe more suitable. Maybe it's a lot slower. You're living in Manhattan, you move down here, it's way different. Even if you're in Jacksonville, it's completely different.
Have you heard of barndominiums?
Barndominiums, yeah.
I mean, that's another trend, right?
Yeah.
This alternative housing of, mm-hmm, hey, we can go outside the city, we can get us an acre or two, put a slab on there and build this giant barndominium, which is just basically a steel structure that's going to, be open in the inside, and we can make it what we want.
Yeah.
Seeing those is cool. You see the 3D printed houses. I know I came from Atlanta prior to this. They had container homes there, right, where you take a bunch of shipping containers and make housing. Mm-hmm. I think as much as we can say, hey, we got issues with housing, there's going to be creative solutions and ingenuity that's going to come along to create some supply. But there's one more trend that I think is really important as we look at the demand in St. Augustine that is different than Jacksonville.
Yeah.
You look at the country was down about 20% mm-hmm, in closings last year, year over year. So comparing 2021 to 2022, down 20%. Same thing happened in Jacksonville, mm-hmm, right? So we basically did what the United States did, which isn't always the case. You look at St. Augustine, the city, had more closings in 2022 than they did in 2021. And that's not normal given what else is going on. What do you think is going on there?
So because we're looking at here the beach closed sales and the city closed sales, so it's important to note that the beach did go down.
Beach went down. Part of that because there's nothing for sale, right?
Yeah.
You can't have transactions if there's no houses for sale.
For sure, yeah. And then you have closed sales in downtown St. Augustine going up.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of that has to do with, and we can go back to the other slide where it talks about the sale price, right? The average sale price in downtown St. Augustine is significantly lower than that of what it is on the beach. But also, I think that the one opportunities that are different between St. Augustine Beach and downtown St. Augustine is going to be in St. Augustine Beach, which is a very localized market. When you're actually looking at the market of St. Augustine Beach, it's not Anastasia Island. It's the city of St. Augustine Beach, right? So that's actually a hyper-local market. Within the city of St. Augustine, you can only have 100 short-term rental vouchers. Okay. So if you are a single-family home and you're looking to, one, you have to be in the zoning for it.
Right.
And then two, you have to have the short-term rental if you are looking to Airbnb it. Now, of course, are there more than 100? People do what they want anyway. If they get caught, they get caught. But there's the technical level of it is 100 vouchers, right?
Yeah.
So you either need to buy one with a voucher, or you have to get on a waiting list, which is
Arguably,
forever.
yeah.
You're probably not going to get on it for years to come, you know? Whereas if you're looking at downtown St. Augustine, the opportunity for an investor is you have a lot more zoning that allows you to do those kind of things, right? So to be an Airbnb, it's a lot easier to do in downtown St. Augustine, in that area of West Augustine I was talking about. It's much easier to do it just because there's no restriction, there's no type of voucher that you need. You just need to be in the correct zoning, and that's your property.
Do you worry about what investors are going to do to St. Augustine? Is that something that you're thinking about?
You know, I've actually read an article several months ago about, it was an opinion piece. So it's just some guy just talking, you know, out of his ass. But he was like, hey, you know, St. Augustine, it should be like from, let's say from Volano Beach where that bridge is to Anastasia Island, it's all owned by one entity and be an essential like luxury resort. So everything about downtown St. Augustine, all that in like one plastic bubble that you live in. And, you know, as someone that grew up on St. Augustine Beach, do I like to see it? I like to see people winning, you know, and I understand like
It's better than the alternative, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, you know, especially if it's me, right? But it does suck to see when things change a lot. Like when I was a kid, there was literally like blueberry fields on St. Augustine Beach that I would like, you know, it sounds kind of funny, but I'd run through and like eat the blueberries and stuff. And, you know, I had a fort in the woods, and it was more or less a homeless man's shelter, but I still it was called the Thunder Fort, and that's condos now. They're both condos now, you know? So I think with investors in the area, I think it's a good thing and a bad thing. And does there need to be some sort of regulation? Yeah, I think so, because what happens is then the whole town is investors, right? And then what we're seeing now is that people can't afford to live in downtown St. Augustine or St. Augustine Beach. So it's those people that historically have lived here, have made the money of the people that make money here, which is around $40,000 a year. I think it's $37,000 for an individual. It's not a whole lot to buy a house on these days, you know? And is that because of the investors driving up the market? Partly, but it's also because people are our town just became more attractive. So it's like, you can't just blame it 100% on investors, you know, because it's not just their fault. It's also the people who sold their house up north. They're sitting with a whole bunch of cash, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and live my dream, what I want to do, move down to St. Augustine Beach and downtown St. Augustine, do my thing, you know? So it's a double-edged sword. You love to see people win, because a lot of the, you know, clients that we help buy investment properties, we want them to make money, right? Because then they want to come back and buy another property, and then they're happy, right? And then I'm sure you, as well as I do, we believe in the wealth building of real estate, right?
100%.
So I believe in it. I want people to do it. So I'm all for people being investors, especially if I know you. Buy a house, you know. Let's go. Let's get some money in your pocket, some passive investment. You know?
Yeah, that's awesome. I just was curious as a local. We don't have that same risk here in Jacksonville from the standpoint of, you know, you're not going to have your entire town be Airbnbs.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's a far greater risk in St. Augustine.
Yeah, and I think like Jacksonville Beach and Jacksonville in general is huge, right? You know, and there's so much space that you can do so much with here in Jacksonville, which is why we're seeing so much development. I mean, we talked about it before the show, just driving up A1A from St. Augustine, you go through Ponte Vedra Beach and you see millions of dollars of real estate being built right now, you know, and not like it's just one or two. It's like 20 or 20, like on the ocean, across the street on A1A, like beautiful, beautiful homes being built in today's world, you know? So I think it's all changing, you know, and as a local, it does hurt a little bit, because used to be able to, $198,000 used to be able to get a house in downtown St. Augustine. Sounds pretty sweet to me today, when we bought our townhome in 2019 for $165,000. So
that's great.
Yeah, it's a little rough, you know, when you look at it that way, but hey, it's there's nothing you can do about it at the end of the day. Right? People are going to buy and sell. It's an individual person's decision on what they want to do. And at the end of the day, our job is to facilitate the transaction, you know?
Yeah. And buying is not for everybody, but I will say this, getting in the game sure does help. If you bought, guess what? You can use your equity when you want to trade up, and the property values going up is not, it sort of is offset, because you're going to come away with the money from your house. So does that mean property values will always go up? Does that mean you'll always win? No, but it over time has always shown to be a good investment.
Well, the definition of winning too, right? Like, okay, so if you didn't buy a house, you're then renting, right? And all that money is going where? To someone else's mortgage, essentially. Right. Well, you could, maybe the price of your home goes down for the next couple of years, but over the span of time, historically, we know that it'll probably go up, right?
Right.
So you get locked into a monthly payment, you know? You're not having to worry about your landlord raising the rent on you.
Security on your house. Yep.
And that's one of the big things. I think the past couple of years we moved away from like talking about the long-term benefits of home ownership,
right?
Just because of how fast everything was moving, you know, and it was almost like you couldn't even have that conversation because there was 10 homes on the market. The 11th one came up and you got to go show it at the 11th hour, and you show one home and that's it. And then, hey, do you want it? Do you want to make an offer? Well, let me know in 5 minutes because you can't sleep on it, you know?
Right.
So we're all glad to be away from that market. At least I am, because that was a rough one these past couple years.
Are you feeling multiple offers come back in St. Augustine?
So that's actually something that I've heard a lot about. I was in one multiple offer situation, but the other offer dropped. So I feel like it was kind of a fake multiple offer. But just from all the other realtors that I know in St. Augustine and St. Johns County, multiple offers have been coming around here. And that's also just starting this month, right? It wasn't happening in December, but December, you know, Thanksgiving through the holidays of December, kind of a wash for real estate for the most part. Most people aren't looking to buy or sell during that time. Right. So, and then before that, we had peak interest rates at 7.2% in October, inflation at the highest point, you know, and sending money to Ukraine left and right. So we had a lot of things going on in the world, and I think it made a lot of people scared, which kind of goes into my next question here for you.
Okay.
It's about the market, and I know with the Market Distillery, you guys do a great little graph of a meter that kind of tells you what's a buyer's market, what's a seller's market. And by all the stats that we look at, we are 100% in a seller's market. Are we in the seller's market of last year? No.
Right.
But why are we in a seller's market and it feels like a buyer's market?
That's a great question. And sometimes it goes to the fact that the definitions change over time. You know, if you go back historically, you know, we've got roots with Keller Williams, and Gary Keller used to always say, look, 6 months of inventory is a balanced market. And so if you had more than 6 months of inventory, it was a buyer's market because there was plenty of inventory on the market, a lot of houses for sale, so buyers could pick and choose, and the sellers didn't really have control over anything. It was up to the buyer, you know, how the deal was going to go, basically. You know, fast forward to 2020, we had less than 1 month of inventory at a point. An extreme seller's market. There's so few options on the market that the sellers hold all the cards. The seller wants you to waive your inspection. The seller wants no appraisal. And, you know, if you do an appraisal, you're going to pay $50,000 over price of whatever that comes in at because, look, I got the cards, right? You want my house? I got the house. You got to give me everything. In general, what I would say is it's far healthier to have a balanced market, but what makes a balanced market can change over times. Within the last 5 years, we've sort of said, well, look, 6 was the old balanced market. Now it's 4, you know, and part of that is because we just don't ever see ourselves getting to 6. And so you have to change the definition a little bit. And so I would say whether it's a buyer's market or seller market is all about who has control, regardless. And the number can help us tell that, but not necessarily. And so this goes back to the good inventory versus bad inventory question. We may have almost 4 months of inventory in the market, but that doesn't mean it's all good. And so if you have a house that's renovated or you know, in good condition, maybe a newer house that doesn't need a lot of repairs, got updated systems, and it's in a good location, then you hold all the cards still, because there's not a lot of those on the market. And there's still, maybe there's some give that has to happen where you're giving some credits to buy a rate down, or you're helping somebody with a 2-1 buy down, or some mortgage tactic to make it cheaper for that buyer. But at the end of the day, you're still getting most of what you asked for. And it's also about, you know, when people talk about a price reduction, okay, well, if my house was technically worth $500, but I said I'm gonna list it at $600 and I had to drop it $100,000, that's like a phantom price reduction. I mean, sure, you dropped it $100,000, but it was $100,000 over. So does that really count? Right? You didn't really have to get into your money. People have so much equity that they can give a little and they can still make deals work. So a lot of it just depends on the location and the type of house, because there's definitely not 3 months of inventory, for instance, in Jacksonville and Atlantic Beach.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you have a house in Atlantic Beach that's in good condition, there's people that will come down. And if it's in bad condition, they'll bulldoze it.
Yeah.
I mean, they still want it because they want the land.
The location of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the days on market is higher for the homes that have been overpriced, that's pretty obvious, right? But it's like it normally comes down to price and condition, right?
Yep.
So if they're not in one of those main locations that people want to be in, then you really need to be strategic about your price and your condition, right?
Sure.
So you're not going to put just some junky home back on the market and you're going to price it at the highest price possible. You need to be strategic and competitive with what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, and you bring up a great point on days on market. I think traditionally the average realtor looks at days on market, and if days on market goes up from 20 to 40 to 60, again, I think alarm bells are going off of the market's crashing. Mm-hmm. Well, we have a different phenomenon going on right now. You have people that are just hesitant to buy. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean they can't buy. I mean, some of them can't, but there's still a lot of people that can. They just don't feel comfortable. And so what I think we should revisit days on market as is the pace of sale, rather than, is the market good or bad? It's more about how long does it take to sell a house than anything. And sure, a higher number is not as good, but it's more about managing expectations with the seller of how long it would actually take to sell. So right now, it takes a little bit longer. And part of that is because maybe there's fewer people in the market to look. But at the end of the day, the prices are still going up. So it's just people are a little bit more hesitant, but they're still paying for the house at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And the prices are still going up here. And interest rates went up to 7.2%. And now they're coming back down. Right. So mortgage applications are up week over week, which is a good sign. We all want to see that, right?
Yep.
What do you think in terms of this market? If someone's saying like, you know what, I want to wait until rates go back down, what would be your advice to them?
Sure. So I would say, who doesn't, first of all, right? Like we would all love lower interest rates, but everyone else is also in that boat, right? So when we talk about what's happened, rates have come down from 7.25%, and maybe now they're around 6.25%. So we've seen about 1% come off. What's interesting is that coupled with January New Year's resolutions was enough to make the highest jump in loan apps since March of 2020. And then the following week, it was up another 7% on top of that, which tells you significant demand is still there, waiting for the opportunity. So if I'm a buyer, I'm saying, okay, well, there's a lot of other people waiting for this. The question is how long can I wait before everybody else enters the market? So where I try to get the best deal, but I don't have to compete against that many people. And I think you're looking at the months of January, which is almost over, February, and maybe into March. You're going to get sellers that are going to be willing to give you some. They're going to give you concessions. They're going to help pay closing costs to get a deal done. And rates may come down while you're in process. So you get a good deal. And you don't have a lot of people trying to compete with you because of them trying to buy more around the summer season of kids are out of school, then we're going to make a move. So if you're thinking about selling, it's a great opportunity to get in there without a lot of competition either, because a lot of people don't really bring their house to the market until March. So if you want to sell and you sell in February, you got fewer houses to compete with. You're probably going to get the benefit of these rates coming down. And it's an opportunity that I think is going to be gone before you know it. So I think really we say, look, you're going to have a lot of competition. So if you want to have maybe a little less stress in your life, if you want to have a little more opportunity on options on houses, doing it sooner rather than later is probably going to present that. And the only thing that would change that is, if we hit some sort of significant downturn in the economy that really pushes rates down, sure, maybe you could get a better rate later. But the question is will you actually get a chance to buy that house because of all the other competition? And, what else are you giving up to get that house that maybe might offset the rate that you're getting?
Yeah. And I think with that, like one of the best questions to ask a buyer is in that situation is, well, what do you think everyone else is going to do? Right. So we just talked about inventory where it's at. We talked about interest rates where they're at and they're coming down a little bit. and people are waiting. They want to wait a little bit longer and see maybe they'll go a little bit lower, and then we'll all be back in the market. And then we're going to hit in the spring, summer selling season. We know that builder confidence is not what it was. They're not building houses like they're supposed to be building. So it seems like that it's brewing to almost, like, at least in our area, that if we get back in the low fives, we just turn the switch back on. We're hot.
Yeah.
Again, you know.
Well, fives are the new threes. And it's all about where you're coming from too, right? I have to remind people, okay, when we hit 5 and 6 the first time, like, you were ready to break things. Like, you were going to turn on Limp Bizkit and you were going to go crazy.
Yeah.
Now we're hitting 5s and 6s.
Yeah.
And you're ready to, like, pop champagne. And it's because you're coming down instead of going up.
Yep.
And so that there's such, psychologically, there's a lot of stuff here that says, there's a lot of action that's going to happen, and I think we're going to have a very busy first half of this year at a minimum, and then we sort of get into a question mark after that. But it's something to watch out for.
Yeah. So the same thing could even be said to a seller, right? So what does the seller do, knowing that maybe they're like, hey, you don't want to wait to put my home on the market? Well, it's like, well, going to go into more competition.
Right.
Maybe you'll have more buyers when interest rates go down, So what would be the best advice for a seller in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends on your goals. If you've got to buy a house with a loan and compete, then you might want to sell sooner so that you have a better opportunity on the buy side, right? You may not get as much on your house, but guess what? You'll probably get it back on the buy side. If you wait until rates go down, you may have a good opportunity selling, but you are then in that same trap that you were in before of, well, I want to sell, but where am I going to go?
Yeah.
Right,
so you're stuck with all the other buyers, like, oh man, there's 10 of us here and 2 houses. Cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And you may effectively be trapped.
Yeah.
I'd sell, but I don't know where I'm going to go. And that's a real deal. And we forget the amount of PTSD that people have from this, right? The first time around, nobody knew what was happening. So we were all trying to do it live. We're trying to just adapt to the market. Now it feels like we've played this game before, right? Like, I know how to beat this level.
Yeah.
I know what challenges I'm about to face on this boss. And so we'll see where it goes. But I think you're going to see a lot of people that are like, I'm not doing this again. I'm just going to do it. Like, let's get it done.
Yeah.
I want to go ahead and get a house because I've been living in this house longer than I wanted to.
Yeah. And I think interest rates will definitely help us this year. But last year, when interest rates hit 5, it was a punch in the gut, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like for our area, if they would have just stayed in the 5s,
Sure,
we would have never left. It'd have kept moving just like it was, and at the same pace. But then we went up to the 7s, and then it was like, when we were in 5s, like, no way it's going up to 7. No way. And then it hit 7. And then we're like, oh my God, the sky is falling, right? That's how it felt for a month or two. And then inflation went down, the federal funds rate, that they were doing everything they were saying they were going to do. And everyone felt a little bit more comfortable. And now we're here today, right? So everyone's talking about, every lender is on social media. We got realtors like myself on social saying that interest rates are trending downward. Why are most lenders so confident that interest rates are going to go down?
Well, we're a tribe, just like realtors are a tribe and a lot of other people are tribes. And I think that sometimes it is one person says the message and then everybody else sort of copies it, right? The great example of that is marry the house and date the rape, right?
I said
date
that.
the rape. I have to like say that very slowly when I say that. But we get these sayings or we get these ideas and they start in one place and then they trickle out, right? Like, I still want to know who wrote the first appraisal waiver. And I want to frame that contract because I feel like it's a historical document right now.
Yeah.
But some of that is all based on inflation. When you look at inflation, rates they didn't go up immediately when inflation hit because inflation was transitory, right? That's what everybody was saying. And we trusted them. I don't know why, but the market trusted it.
Yeah.
And then it was like, it turns out it's not, right? And we started to see it be persistent. And so the rates shot up in 2022. Because when you go back and look at inflation, it was all through 2021. We just weren't giving it the merit that we should have. Inflation has come down. And some of that is how it's calculated. If you think about this, if you're growing 10% a year, it gets harder and harder to continue to grow 10% because that's on a bigger number every single time, right? Like going from 1 to 2 is 100%, going from 2 to 4 is 100%, 4 to 8, right? You see how big that starts to get to keep up with it. Yeah. Same thing that's happening with inflation. We had really big increases in inflation that we're having to compete against. And so just naturally, it's really hard to post those big scores again. And so inflation is just going to come down the way it's calculated. It doesn't mean inflation's gone. It just means we're inflating less. That's the other thing that people forget. And also, when this gets, if we hit zero inflation, last time I checked, our prices are high, right? We're not back to where they were before inflation. We just have stopped increasing them at such a rate.
Yeah.
So everybody's talking about rates going downward, one, because they have. And we tend to predict in straight lines. So think about prices. When rates were going up, we didn't want it to go to 7, but all you could think about is how it's just going to go straight up. Same with home values, right? Same with everything. You just assume the trend's going to continue if you spot it. I think a little bit of that is happening, but when you look at the numbers, inflation should come down. And then again, like I said, in June, it's probably going to start to go back up. And so that's why when we forecast interest rates at the Market Distillery, we think we're going to get into the 5s within the first two quarters of the year, and then we're going to potentially start to see it creep back up. But what you really need in every market is stability. Like, okay, great. If it's at 7 and it at least stays at 7, I know what to expect. There were plenty of people that we would quote them numbers one day, and the very next day we'd have to say, I'm sorry. That number is not valid anymore, right? Like it has gone up. And it's very hard to do anything if you can't plan for that. And that's part of that uncertainty. And what I've always heard, Zig Ziglar's got a great phrase. It's, when buyers don't know, they're going to say no. That's what was happening. When things were moving so much, there was uncertainty and they didn't know. So they just said, look, take it or leave it. I'm not going to do anything until I can figure out what's going on, and it's moving so fast I can't figure it out. Now, it's okay if it's going down, but if it's going up, that's not okay. Yeah. And so I think we're in for, again, people. Certainty. Maybe I can get a better deal, but I'd like to get something, and I didn't get anything last time.
Yeah. I don't know if you know David Childers over at KCM, Keeping Current Matters. They said something very interesting, and for me, it's like we know that the federal funds rate and interest rates, they're correlated, but they're not causated, right? They're kind of tied to each other, but they're not directly tied to each other. And they say that the better thing to look at is the 10-year treasury, right? And from what I saw, or from what he said, is that people are expecting interest rates to go down because on average, the difference between the 10-year treasury and mortgage interest rates is 1.74%. And right now we're at 2.74%. So there's that 1% gap that we think we're going to make back up.
Yep. Yeah, there's merit to that for sure. I think that gap can be made up by the 10-year going up or the mortgage rate going down. So we have to remember that, right? The gap, when you look historically, we see these gaps recently. They do correlate with recessions. They haven't always, but that was the first thing that keyed in my mind when I looked at that, I don't know, 6 months ago, something like that. Because I was thinking, is this a good indicator for a recession? We saw it happen. It's an indication of risk when an interest rate goes up. So if the interest rate on a mortgage goes up, that's a risk of people not being able to pay it back, of other things making it a riskier deal. Inflation making it less profitable, things like that. But I do think that the gap, it can be filled either by rates coming down or the 10-year coming up. And if you look at a chart of the 10-year, if you're a technical person, if you like stocks and you've been doing the whole technical analysis thing, it is in a trend going up. We are at the bottom of that trend. We're either going to break down or we're going to break up. And so that's one way that it could be done. So
gotcha. And see, that's an interesting take. The lenders want to talk about, hey, it's going to go down because there's this gap to make up, but no one says, hey, well, the 10-year treasury might go up too. So there's that.
Everybody wants good news, and I'm with that. Like, we create our own realities. I mean, that's the thing. It's super interesting. We say the market's seasonal. Is that because we accept that it's seasonal and we don't take action in certain seasons? Or if every realtor said December is no longer an off month, I'm going to actually go out and lead generate so hard in October and November that we're going to make December a top month, or November a top month, or January a top month. I think sometimes these patterns are self-created, and it's I always hold this, like, I want to be realistic. I think it's important that we do this, but I also want to be very encouraging because at the end of the day, if you can say, I can go make a difference and the things that I do matter, you're going to walk out of here and you're going to do them.
Yeah.
And guess what? The world's going to be a better place because of that.
For sure. Yeah. And you know what? It's a lot of realtors do have that seasonality about them too.
Sure.
They're like, you know what? December's coming around. I think I'll take a little break and I'll, take my foot off the gas a little bit. But like, there's also other realtors who do more business than they did the entire year, in the month of December, which is, it's exactly what you say. You make your own reality in that respect.
Yeah. There's a great story about an agent out of an office here in 08. And, she was new, came in, and everybody else was like floundering, right? Like the market, worst timing ever. And she was crushing it. And the running joke was like, don't tell her we're in like the worst crash ever, because she's killing it because she's not paying attention to it.
Yeah.
And that just speaks to, again, if you're anything you do in life, put the blinders on, don't worry about what's going on out there, focus on your local market and what you can control and your activity and go get it.
Yep. I agree. All right. So you're obviously very well read on the market. If you were to give some benchmarks for a buyer or a seller and they're looking at the market and they got the stats in front of them, what are the main things that you're looking at to evaluate a market?
Yeah, so one of the reports that I put together is a trend report. And this is something, we've got a membership where we're creating a community and we have these premium resources, and this is a trend report. And so the way I would use this is to understand, again, where the market's headed. You can see if the trend is changing or if anything's going on. And we look at a 12-month trend and a 3-month trend. And some of this is seasonality, right? Meaning you're naturally going to see things change at certain times of the year. But if I'm a buyer, I'm looking for and I have time. That's the other thing. Like, it's really hard to time a house purchase because this is a very necessity thing. Yeah. Or say I'm an investor, right? We'll look at that. I'm looking for a change in the trend of maybe supply is starting to go down and demand is starting to go up in the short term, but we haven't really detected that yet. Or maybe rates are starting to come down like they are, and I'm gonna foresee that that's going to cause a lot more demand. So I'm going to go ahead and front run that a little bit. Benchmarks though, it's tough because I think at the end of the day, every buyer and every seller that's doing a primary residence, it's a personal decision, right? Yeah. And as much as the market matters, you're making the decision for your family or you're making the decision for your personal goals, and timing the market's impossible. Yep. So you can't get caught up in that, but you can sort of use some trends to say, okay, we've got 6 months to plan this out. Like, let's look at what's been happening and what might happen and start to forecast. And then maybe we'll say, like, because of this, we're going to try to do it this month. And hey, I want to sell it quickly. So Thomas, let me know the price, because I want to price a little under so that I know that I'm going to get some action on it.
Yeah, and get it moved quick.
Right.
I like that.
Yep.
Okay. Now, we talked a lot about the numbers, talked about the trends. 2023, what do you think is going to happen for 2023 for our local market?
Sure. It's pretty cool. For the first time, we've actually come up with forecasted models for Jacksonville. Now, these are going to be something that I'm going to hold back in terms of showing on the screen, but I'll talk about them a little bit. Yeah. So it starts with rates. Rates are the gas pedal of the market. If rates come down, it's like pressing the gas on the car. You're going to start to see it go faster and faster and faster. Again, we think first half of the year, rates are going to come down. I think after that, rates have a good potential, or there's a good potential that rates potentially start to go back up. So for me, I'm saying, again, tale of two halves. First half, full of opportunity. Everybody's happy. We're coming down off things. They're getting in there. And then you're going to see an incredible amount of urgency in the second half because people do not want to let things get bad. Now, at the end of the day, I don't expect to go from 5 to 7. Now, we could, and that's tied to inflation, right? Something crazy happens. The Fed drops the rates and pumps a bunch of money in. That could help. But again, that's tough because they're going to be buying mortgage-backed securities and pushing rates down while inflation's going up. And it's like, what do investors care about more? So tale of two halves. For inventory, we expect to see that stay around the 7,000 mark, right, in Jacksonville. And again, it'll probably be more of a hump throughout the year. there's not a lot of scenarios where I can foresee inventory changing significantly. If rates go up a bunch, it's not like a bunch of houses are going to hit the market, right? People are going to stop transacting, and we're going to be stuck at a relatively similar amount of houses. Only the people that have to move are going to move. The people on orders for the military, the people getting relocated, the people dying, things like that. If rates go down, same thing. Sure, maybe more people will list their house, but there's going to be a heck of a lot more buyers on the market that are going to keep that inventory in check. So we see that being very consistent for the year. And we know the builders are not building this massive supply of houses that's going to be unleashed on the market. You look at the permit data for Jacksonville, and we have less permits this year than we did the year last for single-family homes. So it's not something where there's this big wave of new construction that's about to happen. When we look at closings, we expect closings to be up about 7% compared to 2022. Part of that is, again, rates coming down, fueling that market. Part of that is also people know what to expect, realistic expectations. If you don't have heartburn over what you got now, because guess what? You've had time to adjust to that. You've had time to get used to what's going on. And so we could see more transactions happen, especially if the rates get to where you get to 5 with a couple discount points. Now you're in the 4s maybe, right? There's people with 3s that would buy at 4.
Yeah.
Right? They just won't necessarily buy at 5, 6, or 7. And the thing I'd say about that too is, if you've got a low interest rate and that's what's holding you back, you need to run those numbers.
Yeah.
People assume that if you go from a 3 to a 6, your payment doubles. That is not true, right? And you have to run those numbers. 1, you're going to have a bunch more equity to put against that new loan. And 2, that's just not how the math works. Yeah. So it's really important to get with your financial partner, your realtor, get with a lender who knows what's going on, Bank of England, and make sure that you run those numbers and plan that out, because I think people are holding themselves back when they don't need to be, just because they don't actually have the facts.
And that's the biggest thing that you're providing with the Market Distillery and just being a lender as well, is like, here's the information.
Yeah.
Do what you will with it, right?
Sure.
If you don't want to make a move, great. If you do, you're an educated person. In both scenarios, you're right?
Yep. Well, and we all got in real estate to help people.
Yeah.
I mean, I came from a corporate background because I was like, you do a bunch of stuff and then what? Like, you don't see anything for it. You go to this job where you're working with individual people buying individual houses, you're like, that life is changed because I helped them, right?
Very true.
And so it's super, our mission this year that we've been talking about is, don't worry about the rates. Don't worry about the competition. Don't worry about anything. Focus on the client's goals.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good thing for any business, right? If you're in business, focus on the client's goals and you'll do well.
Yep. I agree.
Yep.
All right. So we did the 1-year forecast, and I kind of have a feeling the 5-year is going to be about the same. What do you think about the next 5 years let's talk about Jacksonville.
Sure.
Just because Jacksonville over the last 2 years, it's actually, in my opinion, turned a corner. Because you got to think downtown Jacksonville has been wanting to develop for a long, long time, and the best restaurant in downtown Jacksonville for the longest time was Hooters,
Right. And great restaurant.
Yeah.
Great wings.
Their wings, fantastic, So what do you see for the future of Jacksonville?
Yeah. So let's just say that the vision gets blurrier the farther we go out, right?
True.
Here's what I would say. We have that age demographic thing that I do think is going to come into play near that timeline. You're going to have a population of baby boomers that are going to be aging, and something's going to happen with them from the standpoint of they're going to move in with their family, or they're going to sell their house and go to assisted living. So that's a factor that I don't think anyone's talking about that is on the horizon. Like, it's hard to. We've gone through a time warp. Like, I don't even remember January of last year. So thinking 5 years in the future is really tough. But I do think that's on the horizon. It's something we're going to have to deal with. Who knows what our economy is going to look like. I think we're going to be in a better spot, but I'm an optimistic person. I think we have a city. If Jacksonville Jaguars keep winning,
that's what I'm saying.
I mean, that in itself brings an energy to your town.
Yeah.
And so there's optimism there. We know the development going on. Quentin has just met and talked with the chamber's president, and he's talking about these 60 companies that are coming here, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's this tremendous wave of growth that is going to happen throughout the state over the next 5 years. And so when I see that, I say, I think property values are going to go up. Mm-hmm. I think that we're going to see potentially towards the tail end of that some challenges on some demographic stuff, but that relocation trend I think is going to still be there. And here's one for you. Texas is probably going to be the number one state of people relocating to Florida within the next 5 years. And the reason why I say that is property taxes.
Oh yeah.
So here we have the homestead exemption just like them. We're homestead states. That is primarily protecting your property from the ability to, have it seized or lose it or things like that. We have a discount on our taxes here. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, we have a cap on our taxes. So property taxes cannot go up more than 3% a year. Mm-hmm. Texas right now is full of lawsuits of people saying my taxes jumped and I didn't do anything. So why is this happening? Their cap is 10% a year. Oof. So you got a bunch of people from California going to Texas, mm-hmm. buying up all the properties. Property values are skyrocketing. And all these people who didn't do anything are waking up and getting their tax bill, and they're going, it's 10% higher. Ooh. And taxes in Texas are like $20,000. Taxes in Florida are like $4,000.
Yeah.
So it's 10% on a really big number already.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to have a bunch of people that go, look, where can I live in the United States that probably feels like this, that believes the things I believe, that probably supports me in ways I like to be supported, and I'm not going to have this tax issue that just bit me. Mm-hmm. And I think Florida is the obvious answer there. So that is a big trend that I would not be shocked if that happened. And so, that's what I see.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, hey, Alex, let's round this out here. Let the people know, where can they reach out to you? Where can they, they're looking to get a loan, go to your Bank of England. If they're looking just for information, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yep. So, you bring up a great point. We're born out of Bank of England, even though we're separate of it. Mm-hmm. And I'll say that Bank of England, full of advisors, full of people that are focused on the client's goals, running all the scenarios and helping people make informed decisions, just like at the Market Distillery. But you can find us on Instagram when it comes to social media. Yep. I am coming off a 7-year hiatus of social media and am relearning all of it, but I'm focusing only on Instagram. And that's because I love colors and pictures.
Yeah.
And so, if you know our work, we do a lot of charts and we do a lot of visualizations because that tells the story and can help. So follow us on Instagram. And then you can go to our website, themarketdistillery.com. Okay. And that is where we are creating, again, a community of market professionals who have a need and a desire to ultimately transform and become market insiders. Mm-hmm. And you look at yourself and you look at what you're doing. You are the market insider of St. Augustine, mm-hmm. right? And who would not want to work with you compared to somebody who doesn't know what's going on? Exactly. And so, one of the things we're launching, and I don't know when this will come out, but it's at the beginning of February, is a premium membership for market professionals. And it's called the Market Insiders. And we're going to offer special resources to them where we do these, those trend reports, and we provide answers to specific questions that realtors are getting from clients. And we do it in a shareable format where I'm recording a video answering it and explaining everything so that you, the realtor, don't have to. You can say, oh, you got that question? Great. Let me send you this real quick because this answers exactly that. Yeah. And we're going to create a community of collaboration where realtors are talking about what's going on live. And we know that it happens on the streets before it shows up in the stats. And so that's going to be something where if you want to know what's going on, that's where you need to be. So you can join that. We'd love to have you, and we appreciate the time.
Awesome, Alex. So you can, at your Instagram is at the Market Distillery.
Yep.
And then your website, themarketdistillery.com.
That's exactly right.
Awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate you. This was amazing. I think people are going to get some great value out of it. So, guys, if you learned a little bit about the market here in Northeastern Florida, do me that solid and tap that subscribe button below. Like the video and comment if you have any questions for me or if you have any questions for Alex. We'll make sure to get those answered. And also go check out the Market Distillery. It's a great resource. It's something that I use as a realtor, and it keeps me informed to give you guys the best information. Until next time.